holiday. I hope you're all doing well. This is our show, The People's TV. It is produced by the People-Pueblo Party that believes in common sense politics for the people, the planet, and the animals. And is also sponsored by the People's Health Project Incorporated. I still got my hoodie on and my colors over it because we were out today. We had a car caravan from the Audubon Ballroom where Brother Malcolm X and Don Pedro Obispo Campos spoke. And then we drove the caravan down to Adam Clayton Powell Jr. State Office Building in Central Harlem. Just engaging people along the way, giving out leaflets, talking to people. And also there was a great event, a great speaking event, Speak Out in Harlem. And, I'm going to bring in my co-host, Bill, and we're going to do our usual introduction. And then we have a pretty good show lined up today. So let's welcome Brother Bill.
Observance Day. We know that his birthday was actually Friday the 15th, would have been his 92nd birthday. And like I like to point out to people, we got hundreds of millions of people that claim the United States soil as their home at one time or another. But he is the only one that has a federal holiday in his name. Not Abraham Lincoln, not George Washington. It is called President's Day. He is the only one. So that is a big deal. So welcome.
All right, man. How you hanging in, man? I know you had a full day today.
Yeah, I mean, we started at 2. On actuality, it was supposed to be from 2 to, whenever we finished. But my day started early. I talked to you early. I just had to get my mind right. So I'm a little exhausted, but it's energizing, and we did it. So That's something that nobody can never take from you. And hopefully it's the impetus of other things, because one of the things that those platform, when you create a platform, anything's your platform. Anything's your platform. Right. You create a platform being incarcerated. It just depends on your mind frame. And because of that platform, this young poet and his mother walked by, and she asked me.
Come on, man. Don't give it away.
Right.
Don't give it away. Hold on to that.
All right, okay. I'll hold that.
I want to hear that. Don't give it away. We're just doing the welcome right now. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to this is our usual segment before we get to the full program. We're going to do the truth about COVID-19. I'm just going to play this. Now, we bring on different guests on the show, and sometimes different guests have different idea about what's going on with COVID. So, I was talking to Bill the other day, and we were like, you know what? I'm a high school teacher. And I'm like, people got to start reading, right? People got to go to authors and news media and social media that they can trust. And that's what we want the People's TV to be, a source for accurate information. But there's nothing that beats reading. This book here, I've been recommending it, How to Survive a Pandemic. It was originally written in 2006. And about a third of the book is references. So you can see exactly where Dr. Greger got his information from. Because everybody's opinion is beautiful. It's wonderful. It's great that human beings can think about things and have opinions and have feelings. Feelings are beautiful. But when we want to get to the truth about something and then take action about it, we need evidence. We need to check that evidence to see if it's valid or not. We can't just be like, taking people's word for stuff. No, let's be critical. Where is your evidence? Now, if somebody says to me, well, in my opinion, I think such and such, then that's cool. That's what you think. Thank you very much. I love you. Hugs, right? All power to you. But if somebody comes to me and tries to make it seem like they're an authority on something without even doing any research, then I'm going to still love the person, but I'm not going to be listening to what they got to say, right? Because for me, I got to know that there's some evidence, some facts behind what people are saying. It can't just be a feeling. And so I'm going to play a piece of this. It's like a trailer for the book, a promo for the book. And I'm not getting no money off this book. But the research that this man did, we have to read it, understand it, and then share it with others who have a feeling about something but ain't got no facts. So before we do, though, I'd like our guest to also hear the promo. So I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to do something a little different this time. Brother, welcome from Baltimore, Brother Andre Powell. You want to say welcome?
Greetings and welcome, everyone. And thank you very much for the invitation. I do need to ask a favor because I've changed audio sources. If you can hear me, just hold your hand up by your shoulder like that. That's great. Okay.
The Macarena over here. Okay, so you good?
I'm fine.
Right. So I'm gonna play this short clip. We do this in the beginning of the show to deal, or at least put out ideas, give people ideas about how to survive the pandemic, right? And the good thing about this book, it does research. It tells you how these pandemics develop, and it also has a checklist of things you need to have in your home and things you need to do to survive. So it's also a survival mechanism. And I know the Black Panthers in their day were big on survival, and some of the older Panthers still have survival programs, but we absolutely have to survive. And so I'm just going to play this very short video, and I hope everyone here and the audience finds it fruitful.
Many people think that How Not to Die was my first book. It's actually my fourth. Before I started nutritionfacts.org, I had a career in public health, specializing in emerging infectious diseases. That's how I got to defend Oprah Winfrey and got invited on the Colbert Report and testify before Congress. And in 2006, I wrote a book on pandemic prevention and preparedness, that had an entire pandemic preparedness planning checklist for families, where I have the masks ready and the hand sanitizer and the disposable gloves and the food, the water, the toilet paper. I went through the whole thing. Of course, back then, few people paid much attention to the coming pandemic threat. But finally, I'm able to put that expertise to use. The current coronavirus crisis provided the impetus and time for me to kind of revisit that body of work. I was in the midst of a 200-city speaking tour for How Not to Diet, my last book, before COVID-19 started spreading around the globe. I was sadly disappointed that my lectures and travel had to be suspended. Only made it to about 40 of those cities. But it enabled me to seize this opportunity to, once again dive deep into the pandemic preparedness literature and bring you the latest science amidst all the prevailing noise and nonsense out there. The time is not for panic, but for common sense measures to protect yourself and your family, both now and in the future, against emergent outbreaks. The current COVID-19 pandemic, as deadly as it may be, may just be a dress rehearsal for the coming plague. Decades ago, a flu virus was discovered in chickens that would forever change our understanding on how bad pandemics could potentially get. It was named H5N1 and appeared capable of killing more than half the people it infected. Half. Imagine if a virus like that started spreading explosively human to human. Consider a pandemic 100 times worse than COVID-19. Not the fatality rate 1 in 200, but more like 1 in 2, a coin toss. Thankfully, H5N1 has so far remained a virus more poultry than people, but it and other new deadly animal viruses like H7N9 are still out there, still mutating, with an eye on that 8 billion strong buffet of human hosts. With pandemics, it's always a matter of when, not if. And a universal outbreak with more than just a few percent mortality wouldn't just threaten financial markets, but civilization itself as we know it. My new book, How to Survive a Pandemic, contains everything you need to help protect yourself and your family from the current threat, but also digs deeper into the roots of the problem and tackles the fundamental question, how can we stop the emergence of pandemic viruses in the first place? If there's one thing I learned from my work on preventing and reversing chronic diseases, that is, whenever possible, we should treat the cause. How to Survive a Pandemic will be out in physical copies this fall, but the audiobook and ebook versions are going to be fast-tracked and out next month, May 2020. You can pre-order it at nutritionfacts.org/COVID-19. That's nutritionfacts.org/COVID-19. And of course, all proceeds I receive from the book will be donated to charity. I hope How to Survive a Pandemic is useful to protect you and your family, the community, and this great, big, wonderful, happy human family.
Okay, so this is the book. He talks about coming out in May. That's an older video from early in the year, so the book is already out. And for those folks who absolutely, positively hate reading, guess what? It's something called audiobooks. So you could be washing the dishes, fixing the car. You could be doing any number of things in your home, and the audiobooks will read to you. You won't even have to read the book. So honestly, like, there's absolutely no excuse why something as important as a pandemic can't be researched, right? Because our feelings are wonderful. I love feelings. They're great. I love them. But we need to read, we need to study, we need to research, and we need to ask critical questions. So, and along with that book, and next time I'll do a trailer for this book, is called America, the Farewell Tour. And it talks about the decay and decline of the American empire, so that you know why in Cuba, why in Vietnam, why in China itself, why in South Korea, why in Japan, why in Australia, why in those countries they're controlling COVID and not allowing it to go out of control. And this book really helps you understand how the American empire is in such decay, such moral decay, economic decay, political decay, that's the reason they have no control over this virus. Okay, so I think Brother Andre had a slight problem with his technology. So I'm just going to move on to the next part of our program. And I invite everybody, please do your research. Whatever we say on this show, we say it because we love you. But, if you do your own research and come up based on the facts, your own conclusion, that's a lot better than blindly following anybody or blindly repeating what anybody has to say. Okay, so let's start this off. I'm going to play a short video. Today is we're honoring Dr. King. I wish I had some footage of today's event, but I'm going to start us off because, Dr. King, like many of our martyrs and our ancestors, they teach us things that we can use in the present day. And so we have Trumpism on the rise, which many political people understand to be fascism. We also have a very serious economic problem. We talked about it today in our rally in Harlem, the eviction crisis. Right? We talked about so many different political prisoners, mass incarceration, censorship now going on. We don't know how long this show is going to be on, right? And what does Dr. King teach us about what we should be doing? So I'm going to play one of his short videos. Here we go.
And I think that is an answer to that myth. And it is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm absolutely convinced that the forces of ill will in our nation, the extreme righteous in our nation, have often used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill. And it may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words of the bad people and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, wait on time. Somewhere we must come to see that social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. And so we must help time, and we must realize that the time is always right to do right.
And I'm going to ask y'all to jump in, because as Dr. King saying, he was dealing with right-wing forces during his time. During his time, it wasn't called Trumpism. You know, it was called fascism and the right wing, right? And he had to deal with that. And so he did, I think, exactly what we were all doing today, which is not waiting for them to come for us, right? But take action. And so, you know, if y'all could talk a little bit about the actions that y'all took today in honor of Dr. King, and connect it to how we need to defeat Trumpism and fascism. Anyone can go first.
You gotta unmute yourself. He's muted, Mark.
I think his Bill, maybe you should go first while he gets his sound together.
Okay, I would say two things. One, I would say it also sounded like to me that Dr. King was saying he didn't have that much time. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have time to waste. Him, Malcolm, Medgar, people like that, they knew they were on a ticking clock and their time was short. But now, in relationship to your direct question as to today, what we was doing today, we was really going back and revisiting him as a person, him as a leader, as an activist, as an activator. Because what happens a lot of times is when time gets between the actual act and the actual act is being that person actually talking and having and being able to shake you and say, look, brother, look, sister, by his words, metamorphically shaking you, and time goes between, it starts to lose some of its steam. Its appreciation is always there. It's heightened, and it's, you know, you look at the NBA slate of games and you have everybody talking about Dr. King. We have people such as our self-conscious people. We'll talk about him, but what are we doing between the actual observant from year to year, between 365 days? So it gave a series of things happened. What happened over the summer, leading up to it, 6 months prior to his birthday. What happened on January 6th, 9 days prior to his birthday, 12 days before the third Monday of the observance of his birthday. You have a chance to look, and you can see, when you look, and you don't have to dive deep, and you look at his word, what's changed? What's changed? All the things, all the ilks that he said was really profoundly illuminated over the summer. And for those that still didn't want to believe it, because that was only half the equation, we did a lot of nonviolent march that he had adopted. We adopted that, and we was getting pushed, unprovoked attack. People have bodily injuries now that they're probably not going to get better from, and the worst of it, they don't have nobody to sue because it was done at the hands of Babylon, the police department, the militia, the slave catchers. And then if you didn't believe your lying eyes, you can compare it on the backdrop of the 6th, Wednesday, January 6th, which by no means was that an insurrection. An insurrection doesn't look like that. An insurrection is when people open the gates and let you dismantle the gates, the metal barricades, and open the door for you. That's not an insurrection. What that is showing you white privilege at its worst. Okay? So all the things that he said, you could put it in time capsule, buried it in dirt, and opened it in 2021, and it would have been just as profound in 1968 and before as it is today. So I'll start with that, and I'll turn it back over to you two guys.
Okay, thank you. So Andre, talk to us a little bit about what y'all were doing today and how that connects with Dr. King's struggle against these rightist forces, or these, in our modern time, these Trumpist fascist forces. No, we can't hear you. I mean, we could hear you before. Is it, was it because you put on the headphones? Well, what happens if you take off the headphones and just work with your computer?
Me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're rocking and rolling.
The headphones had a break in it.
Well, they worked at first.
They're loud and clear now, though, brother.
I put those on because the program in my computer, for some reason, your program is not, the volume is wasn't very good. So I had to put these on to be able to hear. Today in Baltimore, we had a 15-car caravan from the city of Baltimore down to Jessup, Maryland, which is approximately 12 miles. The theme of the program was Stop Trump, Stop Fascism. Today, we specifically targeted the prison complex here in the state of Maryland. Jessup is a prison complex that has one building for women, and then it has 5 or 6 buildings for men prisoners. And originally, we have a prisoner solidarity committee whose original plan was to car caravan to Jessup to raise the issue of protecting the prisoners from COVID-19, because the prisoners can't go out of the prison. So how do they get COVID-19? It comes into the prison by correctional officers and staff that work there. And the state of Maryland is not doing enough to stop it and protect the prisoners that are under their charge. So, and after the coup attempt this past on January 6th, we felt it was necessary to combine the cause of both to protect prisoners from COVID-19, but also to put a call out to stop Trumpism, to stop fascism, because we do see it as definitely a fascist movement that is building. But what people forget, in my opinion, is that this movement has been growing since the day that President Barack Obama was elected. If you remember the earlier years of the Obama administration, Donald Trump went on his rants and raves about birther. Oh, let's see, where's the birth certificate? Is he really born in this country? Trump couldn't stand the fact that the black man was president of the United States. And he built this following that began with the Tea Party. People seem to have, you see their name is not in the news anymore these days, but the Tea Party began as an effort to fight back against the Affordable Care Act of President Obama's administration. And that's when Donald Trump jumped in, as best I can recall, and began what the news people try to call this birther movement. If that really isn't fake news, what is? And he rallied the racist forces that surrounded him, and it has come to light in those 12 years that he indeed has been a white supremacist all along. His father was a member of the John Birch Society. So when they call him a white supremacist in chief, that is exactly what he is. And we brought that out with driving through the streets of Baltimore, through Anne Arundel and Howard counties, with a bullhorn on top of the lead car with chants of stop Trump, stop fascism, Trump, no Trump, chants against Trump and against the pending coup. But when when I looked at this clip of Dr. King, I thought of the particular part where he said about how he talked about time and the uses of time, and this advent of Trumpism from the election of President Obama up to now shows that he was right on the point, because he said the right word, I believe he called the rightist people, we call them the right wing these days,
yeah,
made effective use of the time. Over those 12 years, they were gathering their forces, actually sitting and waiting. And when Trump lost the election, he right away began to call out, "It's stolen from me. We need to go to Washington and tell them how we feel." He himself put out the call. So he's trying to say, I had nothing to do with that. He put out the call himself to come to Washington, D.C.
And let me tell you something, Brother Andre. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was talking to Bill the other day, and I was telling him that when George W. Bush stole the election from Al Gore by discarding black votes in Florida, what Roger Stone did, who's now a buddy of Trump, who just got pardoned by Trump, he organized a riot where they were counting the votes in Florida. And so they had to shut down where the votes were being counted. And then the Supreme Court with Clarence Thomas and them said, oh, y'all can't keep counting the votes. It's too late. So what it looks like, and since Roger Stone is out now, they wanted to play that same playbook routine at the Capitol.
Yes, yes.
Because they were counting the electoral votes. Right?
Right.
To
stop the procedure that would end up giving the presidency to Joe Biden.
Right. So this is what I was telling people in my school. There was a lot of people who went there because they hate Democrats. I live in Pennsylvania, and Democrats with the neoliberal Republicans were responsible for getting rid of all the factory jobs here, right? So people ain't got no more union. People ain't got no more yearly vacation. People ain't got the possibility of buying a house. People don't have the possibility of sending their kids to college without taking big loans. So I understand they hate Biden and them. I get that. But at that Capitol, there was a core group of people who knew what they was doing.
Right.
Who knew what they were doing. Who understood how Roger Stone got George W. Bush elected. So
that's why it wasn't an insurrection. That's why it was not an insurrection. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to go back to Andre, and what I'm going to show is one of the pictures from our car caravan today. Brother Andre, I wish I had some of y'all pictures so we could show today, but I'm just going to show that's me, and then the cars behind us, and purple is the color for our organization.
Okay.
Purple and yellow. So that's my son is actually, my 30-year-old son is driving the lead car, and that's our flag, and the cars went all the way back. And and so we did it in the summer, right? And we was giving out leaflets and talking to people, and because everybody's outside. And in the winter, man, let me tell you, we drove by some parts where we were like, well, where are the people at? But and so we just decided, you know what, let's get back in the car and drive up to the Speak Out, because that's where the people are going to be. And it was very good, and definitely we have to use time very wisely. And we have something called the People's United Front, which was the group that actually sponsored this, and with Sharon, she comes to our national Zoom meetings, because we need to come together. We don't need we already know what racists can do, lynchings and killings and torture. And we know that fascists, when Hitler did his thing in Europe, you know what country he really looked at and studied? The United States of America. The United States of America. And what he did was, he said, well, we ain't got no Native Americans here in Europe. We ain't got no African Americans. We ain't got no Latinos who we can enslave. What we're going to do is we're going to take Eastern Europeans. They're going to be our Native Americans. They're going to be our African Americans. They're going to be our Latinos. They're the people who we're going to exterminate and take their land. And so he looked at the United States as his example. And when he kills the 12 million Jews, he sees them the same way the British, the French, and the Spanish saw us, as people who you exploit till they die, people whose land you take. And so I'm just going to turn it back to you, brother.
Okay. The last bit of the first clip where he talks about the silence of the good people. I think that's a clarion call for people for our working class sisters and brothers to get out there and make a noise and agitate. It's because the right wing is organizing behind the scenes. And I think the Reverend Dr. King was telling us to get together, to organize for the common good, and to get out and be visible. When he said, don't be silent, he said, be visible. In the 1980s, there's an organization called AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And the motto of AIDS was silence equals death. That if that AIDS epidemic continued on and nothing was done to stop it, that millions and millions of people would die. So the people that formed ACT UP became an activist movement. They became one of the boldest movements of the 1980s. And it was through their activism in the 1980s and early 1990s that they pushed the science industry, the medical science industry forward, saying, this may work, that might work, that might work. And when medical science industry said, well, we can't try them without trials, we have to protect them, the people that may take this medicine. And ACT UP came back and resorted and said, what do you save a dying man from? Because there was no treatments at all. So I think that's a lesson from Dr. King that certainly applies now with the right wing coming out. And me, I'm 66. I became an activist when I was 21 years old. And I'm still out on the streets, as we did today in Baltimore. And we rolled down the street and gave a little rap against Trump and against fascism and against police brutality and racism.
All right. So, Bill, I'm sharing a picture now with, and I see in the picture Sister Betty, and I see Shoshana Brown, and I see you there with the hat. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what's happening there on 125th Street and Anton Claim Powell Jr. Boulevard.
Yeah, we had 10 demands. We started out with political prisoners. That was the first demand that was put on number one, because we know that political prisoners is a two-edged sword. One is they're in prison to quiet them. Okay, they round them up, they give them trumped up charges, and they overextend the punishment. They give them the max usually, which makes no sense. And then the other reason why we also started out with political prisoners, the significance of that was Dr. King was a political prisoner. He was locked up 29 times. He was even locked up in Georgia, and was it Georgia, Alabama? I don't remember, but he was locked up for doing 25 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour and 25 miles an hour speed zone. So who knows, maybe it was changing lanes, but they locked him up for that. So we know that is important because they've always found ways to lock us up. Now, I want to go deeper on that, but I want to touch on something that Brother Powell talked about, their drive to the prison. The reason why the prison is important because the United States of America makes $43 billion a year with the incarceration of inmates. And we make up the majority. Like he said, they have one house for the women and 5 houses for the men. And how many of them are men of color? And they average a little over $33,000 per inmate. And when you think about it, we have always been connected to a dollar sign. from the time that they robbed us and they wrote our name down on the paper and what our worth was, to Reconstruction, to education, the invasion of charter school. So we talked about all these things. We talked about affordable housing. We talked about education, which in that picture they were talking about education. And it's always a monetary, and prison is always a monetary connection to that. And that cannot be lost, because if you really want to get to the root of anything, I've always said this, follow the money. So today we picked 125th Street, which we said we did with libation, because we brought in the ancestors, because we know anything that we deal with, we always invite the ancestors. And we needed people to know that. And we needed to reaffirm that. And we needed people that used to do it to start redoing it. And people that never did it or rarely did it to consider doing it. Because if you break it, because if your ancestors is literally etched on your DNA. The people that was out there, and whether it be Baltimore with Brother Powell, or came from Pennsylvania, a native New Yorker like Brother Mark, or myself, Sister Betty, Ralph, and others, countless others, if you was to dissect them and pull from their DNA, you would see a genetic match with their ancestors, that their ancestors felt the same way. Their ancestors were resisted. Their ancestors was runaway enslaved African. They had that fight in them. It didn't skip a generation. It's moved from generation to generation to generation. And it was a call to action. We reverberated with Dr. King's words. We had his speech out there. The drum major speech we played. I Have a Dream. I Have a Dream speech. We talked. We had song. Whether it was Fight the Power, whether it was so many songs I can't even think. All the Confusion.
Yeah.
What's going on? The revolution will not be televised. By all these artists, and we got that. We brought up the movement, the spirit. That we talked about how hollow ground, how Harlem has always been the crossword section for Black consciousness. How you was on 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard that runs from north to south on 125th Street, where you was on 125th Street and under the sign of Dr. Ben Way on the northwest corner, and you was on 125th Street, and you was on the corner of the southwest corner, because southeast corner was Dr. Ben Way. On the southwest corner was Alambe Braff Way. On 126th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. On the northwest corner, James Brown Way. Between 124th and 125th Street, the Teresa Hotel that housed Fidel Castro. On 125th Street, running east to west, Martin Luther King Boulevard. And we were standing guard on 7th Avenue, on 6th Avenue, was Malcolm X Boulevard on 125th Street. Who was standing guard on 8th Avenue was Frederick Douglass on 125th Street. On the northwest corner under African Square, on the state office building named after Adam Clayton Powell, you was on hollow ground. Anybody that was somebody passed that intersection of Black consciousness, and we tried to rouse that up. And it was apropos that it started out nice, and then it got a little chilly. It was it tested your resolve. We talked about the indomitable spirit of our ancestors, and they were there. We invited them there, and they let them know it's great that you're here, but we're going to test your mettle. Are you a change taker or a change maker? Do you sit on top of the pile, or do you get behind the pile and push the pile? And that's what we was doing on 125th Street, Harlem, USA, the cross section for Black consciousness, then and now.
All right, thank you, brother. So I'm going to play one more short clip, or rather another short clip of Dr. King, and then we could talk about a little bit about next steps. And right now, the People's United Front hasn't decided what the next steps are going to be, but I think we could start putting ideas out there and then have people think about them. So I'm going to play one more clip from Dr. King, and then we're going to.
I know all of you are studying I'm glad to see you.
In the last 2 months of his life, Dr. King faced the idea that civil rights alone could not solve the problem of poverty.
In Mississippi today. Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you.
He roamed the South, trying to gain support for Poor People's Campaign. Its goals: full employment, a guaranteed income, and decent housing for every American.
People just don't know, but it's really hard. Not only me, it's so many more in the same shape. I'm not the only one. It's just so many of us right around. It's just no have shoes, clothes. They're naked and hungry. Part-time you have to cook your children pinto beans morning, down, and supper. They don't know what else get a good meal.
You all are really to be admired. And I want you to know that you have my moral support. I'm going to be praying for you. I'm going to be coming back to see you. And we are going to be demanding, when we go to Washington, that something be done, and done immediately, about these conditions. Yes.
This was a different Martin Luther King. Just weeks before his murder, in tones suggestive of the Black Panthers, he began to talk about how the government had broken its promise to the newly freed slaves just after the Civil War.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
So,
I think,
go ahead, brother.
you know, for so many years, I have said they began to make Dr. King a target because of his stance on the Vietnam War and connecting it with the struggles here in this country. But as I listen to this clip that was just played, I'm thinking they're afraid of him, but because he was organizing poor and working people from all over the country, yes, to bring them to the doorstep of the U.S. Capitol to address the issues of poverty, to address the issues of the need for employment and housing and an income. And that certainly also additionally played a part, because he began connecting the economic struggle of poor and oppressed people in this country with comparing that with, he began to connect them with the call to end that immoral Vietnam War, which for the United States, I'm glad to say, failed miserably. And Vietnam has rebuilt itself. Richard Nixon carpet bombed the country of Vietnam into non-existence, laid it just flat, just like the US did North Korea in the Korean War. And both countries have rebuilt themselves over the past 60 years and are standing strong today.
Right. Between Cuba and Vietnam, they are showing us textbook case of how to control COVID.
Yes, Cuba has a population equivalent to about the size of New York City, and Cuba has had only 158 deaths from COVID-19. They have alpha interferon B, which is a medicine their biotechnology industry has created and they give that to people in the later stages of COVID-19 when it's hitting them the hardest, and they're showing good results with a good recovery with it. Cuba's biotechnology industry that began to develop in the early 1990s, short after the dismantling of the Soviet Union, which was their economic partner. And in so many ways, and Cuba said, well, we for many years received help from the Eastern Bloc countries. They are gone. We now have to learn to do for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And they have a tremendous health industry. It's really absolutely tremendous. Right. And the U.S. could learn from it.
And they have a strong public health sector.
Yes.
That can control pandemics and these diseases, even epidemics, before they become pandemics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Whereas in the United States, I worked in Harlem Hospital and we got tuberculosis. We eradicated tuberculosis from Harlem, but it was because I got hired. A lot of other people got hired to do that contact tracing. When somebody was sick, mm-hmm. and they weren't in the hospital, we would make sure that they were taking their medicines. And if they didn't want to take their medicines, then they actually got locked up in a medical ward, but we paid their bills.
Mm-hmm.
We made sure that they had no medical cost or housing cost or any other kind of cost, so that when they got better, they would go home. They weren't in the hole the way people are now. Right?
Absolutely.
So
but in Cuba, all medicine and healthcare is free, so there's not even that concern. When I went to Cuba in 1991 and I got sick, went to the health clinic, the first question wasn't, do you have insurance? It was, what's wrong? What can we do to help you?
Right. So I'm going to play another clip on the war in Vietnam, and then I'm going to open it up again because, Brother Andre, you raised the issue of the war in Vietnam. So I'm going to play.
Did I jump ahead of you? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. It was a great segue.
So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such. Perhaps a more tragic recognition of reality took place when it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and to die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Holland. And so we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schools. And so we watch them in brutal solidarity, burning the huts of a poor village, but we realize that they would hardly live on the same block in Chicago. I could not be silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor. My third reason moves to an even deeper level of awareness, for it grows out of my experience in the ghettos of the North over the last 3 years, especially the last 3 summers. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. For those who ask the question, aren't you a civil rights leader? And thereby mean to exclude me from the movement for peace, I have this further answer. In 1957, when a group of us formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we chose as our motto to save the soul of America. We were convinced that we could not limit our vision to certain rights for black people, but instead affirmed the conviction that America would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of its slaves were loosed completely from the shackles they still wear.
I mean, that's amazing, and it's so necessary for us to hear Dr. King and allow him to speak to our minds and our hearts and our souls. Bill, I know you wanted to say something, so I come on in.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to comment on Cuba too before I talk about the Vietnam War. Talk about one of the successes of Cuba. Their doctor to populace ratio is the greatest populace that they have. So that lends itself there. And their doctors also travel internationally, globally. So, I mean, they have a wide range of experience. So that lends itself to Cuba's success too. And if the United States was to be successful and check their ego out the door and get off their high horse, they can learn something from a tiny place such as Cuba. Because the problem is they think their ego is bigger than their island. And that's a problem. Mm-hmm. But I tend to agree with you too, Brother Powell, in the sense that the Vietnam War was a couple of things. I think that can't be understated too, that the Vietnam War accelerated his demise, because now he was at the top of the chart as far as being pecked off. Simply state, because Lyndon B. Johnson, that was his war in a lot of sense. He took offense to Dr. King saying anything about the war because he wasn't pulling people out. And so he took it as an affront. And if you think he didn't, the relationship from him deteriorated. He was on put him through if anytime Dr. King called to, he no longer accepted his calls in the White House once he started attacking the war. So he became public enemy number one. Okay. He put a bullseye on them, and they in turn put a bullseye on him. And they knew his drawing power. They knew about his marches, the people that he was able to join. So he became really a problem, because now you said, what do you offer a dying man? There's nothing to offer him. So if people don't have anything, it ain't no way to go but up. What we got to lose by following this guy? We've seen the success that he had in the past. So the combination of events helped steamroll that, his put him in iconic status. And I've always been a firm believer. If you want to be iconic in a true sense of a revolutionary, you can't live a long life, because it's a small body of work to judge you from. You don't get the chance to get co-opted.
So what I'm going to do, sharing here on the screen, I don't know, Brother Powell, you can see it, but it's the people's 10 demands. And I think that, Dr. King was talking about poor and working people, and that's what we're absolutely doing. I think that the way to erode the lure or the attraction of the right wing, of the Trumpists and the fascists, is for us to start organizing in the community. And that action we had today was in the community. We didn't go to some Usually a lot of left groups, they go to Times Square, they go to Union Square. But what we're promoting is that people go to the neighborhoods, that people go to where our community works, that people go to where our community study, that they go to where the community lives, and that we organize amongst the people and solve problems with the people. So, you know, these 10 demands that we have are not just window dressing, but they're key to help us focus on organizing. And in the chat, Brother Jose had asked, what is the coalition doing to follow up this activity and keep the movement going? I think right now we have an assessment meeting scheduled for Sunday, the 24th of January at 2 p.m. And we're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of what happened today. We're going to go through them, and we're going to come up with moving forward plans. So that's the next step, which is, you know, we want to use our brains. We want to use our experiences. We want to use our history to figure out ways to move forward. But we definitely have to do a strength and weaknesses and figure out how to move this thing forward. And we're definitely going to move it forward with our 10 demands, because I think they're very much in line with what the Black Panther Party came out with, what the Young Lords came out with, what Ewok Kuhn came out with, what the Brown Berets came out with what Dr. King was saying. And that's the thing, right? If we're not resolving the people's problems, organizing them so they can have power, so they can resolve the problems, then all we're doing is speaking to the choir. All we're doing is patting each other on the back, patting each other on the head, and not really getting the people's work done. So we definitely have to do that. And also, we got a comment from Sister Betty, and I'm sure y'all can see the chat and the comments. Sister Betty says, congratulations to the People's United Front, and especially Mark, Bill, Laurie, Larry, Ralph, Zaid, Espinelli, Gia, the drummer, right, Bill? Ifco, Deborah, and so many others for a successful, incredible MLK celebration, the true tradition of protest. And she also says, congratulations to all who participated in making this event so successful. We sent a message to the elites that we are not deceived by this two-party joke. We made our top demands known. Wonderful job was done by all, Betty. And then Sister Laurie Kim comes on here and through the chat and says, well, her sign says Mother Nature is a lesbian. But Sister Laurie Kim says, grateful for all this work. This is a powerful movement of true, sustainable solidarity for liberation. So I don't know if y'all wanted to address some of the comments, or whether y'all wanted to talk about the 10 demands at this point, or you wanted to highlight something else in terms of what Dr. King had spoken to us about.
Answer. See, Jose Alfaro, what is the coalition doing to follow up this activity and keep the movement going? Let me try to say this in a good way. Nice. Well, there are leftists in the United States and progressive activists that have kept the movement going for quite a while. You don't hear about us because we don't have access to the big business media. But I know the people that I work with, we've been organizing together for the past 40 years. And our movement to build people's power is continuing to grow. There are so many issues that we can work, agitate, and organize around. As Karl Marx said at the end of the manifesto, agitate, agitate, agitate. So the movement is still going. It's sometimes splintered. When we have a gigantic war like Bush's war on Iraq, then the movement comes together to march against and back up that war, just as it did in the 1960s during the Vietnam War. So the movement is going. We're going in many directions at once, and the true effort is to organize and build people's power, which means getting rid of the power of the corporations, getting rid of the power of the banks that let the evictions happen, that let the foreclosure happen. I mean, someone's worked their whole life to buy their home. something happens 25 years down the road, can't pay the payment for 3 months, and the bank has a right to foreclose after you have put your lifetime of blood, sweat, and tears into buying and building this home. That is absolutely criminal, and they should all be charged with crimes against the people. So the movement is good. The movement is still going. Everyone listening, I urge you to get involved in a movement, to organize. And when Dr. King said, don't be silent in that first segment, that's what he's talking about. Silence is complicity with this rotten system of capitalism.
Thank you, brother. All right, so I have one last.
Let me just add a little something to it. I'll be really brief. I want to say that the drummer that was on stage, so to speak, his name was Induna. He's a worker of mine, an electrician. And also the other Buddhist drummer name was June San. She goes around the country drumming for peace in the name of a particular Mamiya Jamal. So I want to shout them out. And it's something that I started to say earlier. It was a young man with his mother, a young poet. I should have asked how old he was, but he knew the speech for "I Had a Dream" speech, Dr. King verbatim, in its entirety. And so they asked, could we say? But it was a little frigid. It was long. We told people it was 2 hours. We was approaching 2 and 3/4 hours. So I said, okay, we're gonna give you 3 minutes. You're gonna take a segment. So he did the most popular segment, and he wowed them. And those type of forums, when you write, give it up to him. I brought his mother up because you need to highlight. That's where it starts. That seed is planted and watered, cultured and nurtured within the house, within the womb, within the DNA. That's why we call on our ancestors, and that's why we talk about our past and our present, moving to our future. The same thing that these questions are talking about in the chat. How do we move forward? We got to do an assessment. So I just wanted to say that, and basically, also to piggyback on what Brother Powell was saying, our enemies, if you pay attention, have been creating our platform for us. The pandemic, the tyranny of the last 4 years, everybody having to stay still, and then the uprising on the 6th. All we gotta do is pay attention. They're gonna make our work easy for us if we just follow the money and follow the cries and the screams. All we gotta do is react. All we gotta do is act to it, because they're reactionary. There's 2 types of people. There's leaders or originators and imitators. And everything starts from the cradle of creativity, Mother Africa. Everything. Dance, music, pigmentation, the soul, the vibration. So we are the original people. We are the originators. So all we got to do is keep on doing what we do, because they are reactionary. We will not go nowhere. Think about it. I said this. It's hundreds of millions of people that called America soil their home. But there's only one person that has a federal holiday in their honor, and they killed him, but their conscience made them recognize him.
All right, so on that, that was a great intro. The last short video I have is a short video of Dr. King's granddaughter, making the points that we need to hear. So I'm going to play her, and then we'll close out the program after her.
Some of you may remember that 2 years at the March for Our Lives, I said, spread the word. Have you heard? All across the nation, we are going to be a great generation. That was in 2018. I didn't know what would hit us in 2020. A pandemic that shut our schools and put our young lives on hold. More killings of unarmed Black people by police. Attacks on our right to vote. Worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. we must master ourselves. Less than a year before he was assassinated, my grandfather predicted this very moment. He said that we were moving into a new phase of the struggle. The first phase was the civil rights, and the new phase is genuine equality. Genuine equality is why we are here today and why people are coming together all across the world, from New Zealand to New Jersey. He said that we must not forget the days of Montgomery. We must not forget the sit-ins movement. We must not forget the freedom rides, the Birmingham movement, and Selma. Papa King, we won't! My generation has already taken to the streets peacefully and with masks and socially distanced to protest racism. And I want to ask the young people here to join me in pledging that we have only just begun to fight, and that we will be the generation that moves from me to we. We are going to be the generation that dismantles systemic racism once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that calls a halt to police brutality and gun violence once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that reserves climate change and saves our planet once and for all, now and forever. And we are going to be the generation that ends poverty here in America, the wealthiest nation on earth, once and for all, now and forever. We are the great dreams of our grandparents, great-grandparents, and all our ancestors. We stand and march for love, and we will fulfill my grandfather's dream. So, show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. One last time. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Okay, then let's show them.
DNA. DNA. It's real.
Yeah. So
she said something quite profound in there. She said, let this be the generation that moves us from me to we, that moves us from the individualistic idea of only thinking of ourselves to we, of thinking for the good of all people, how to build a world better for all people.
Ashe.
Wonderful. All right, so we're at the end of the show. We actually went over a little bit, so let's just go around. Any last words before we wrap it up for tonight, Brother Andre?
I think today, both, you can look at the events in New York, up in Harlem, what we did in Baltimore, out in Los Angeles. Depending on what time it is, they might still be doing it since there's a 3-hour difference. And we've come out to stand out against the fascist assault on our country, led by Donald Trump, and organize the people. There's so many people in many different cities, not just the 3 that I've mentioned. And we will stay organized, and we will continue. And we will not be fooled to think that Joe Biden is the answer to all our questions. He's the easy side of the coin of capitalism. Donald Trump is the rough side of the coin of capitalism. And that coin has to be smashed and melted down so we can build a new foundation. There's a better world on birth.
All right. All right.
I would just simply say that I remember one time looking at Like It Is, which was a byproduct of the uprising in the consciousness of the 60s. We had Positively Black, we had the Bill McCrory Report, but the longest sustaining program was Like It Is. And I'm from 140th Street in Harlem, and from the 140th Street in Harlem, you got some iconic people, Sammy Davis Jr., and he financially put his money. He was a silent contributor. You also got the brothers from the Olympics in the 68 Olympics from 140th Street. So I say all of that because he said something that was profound one time. I was looking at it like it is. He said, and it is true because, you know, I remember when I was 8 years old when they did assassinate Dr. King. I remember living in projects, the reaction. I remember going to school the next day, all the destruction, and I understood it, even though nobody explained it to me and prepared for me for when I left the house that day. All the destruction, I realized that we didn't own this, and there was black people tearing up white people's stuff, no matter how many of us worked in it. So, and I also remember saying, wow, to myself, who's going to be the next leader? And me, the charisma of Jesse Jackson, I just thought as a naive 8-year-old that, of course, you know, somebody else was going to rise up. And that person really never manifested itself. But something that Sammy Davis Jr. said, and he said, there's leaders. There's leaders on every block. If you went block by block, you would find a leader. And if we did that and we developed and cultivated those leaders, we can never be leaderless. Leaderless is from within. And what's coming out of when you seen the uprise of the dual pandemic, COVID-19, and the social awareness, that pandemic that went globally, there are some people that a knee-high to a grasshopper and maybe a little older than 8 that is going to be profoundly affected by this, and they will lead the charges. I might not be around for that, but I'm hopeful.
All right. So just on a last announcement before I close out, the People's United Front, Frente Unido del Pueblo, which was trying to coordinate the different actions for Dr. King. You know, we were in communication with folks in Oakland, folks in Detroit, folks in Baltimore, folks here in New York. And actually, we even got in touch with Brother Larry Ham in Newark. We're having an assessment meeting on Sunday, January 24th at 2 p.m. And we're going to, from that meeting, figure out how to move forward. But I think definitely whatever we put on the agenda, the organizations that are in the different cities around this country, the way to erode any kind of base or strengthening of the fascists or the Trumpists is to be in the communities and to organize the people to solve their problems. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
That's it.
So thank y'all for being here tonight. And Bill, I know you're going to be back because you co-host. And Brother Andre, we would like to have you back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, absolutely.
To Baltimore.
That's it.
All right. Much love to Harlem.
I'm in Pennsylvania right now, so I'm closer to Baltimore than I am to New York. So that's something.
What part of Pennsylvania?
I'm in Lancaster.
Oh, yeah, that's only an hour and a half away.
Yeah. And I'm like 3 hours away from New York City. So
yeah.
So y'all need to give me some work down there in Baltimore.
Takes us 3.5 hours to get to New York from Baltimore also.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a frequent flyer Baltimore. Mark knows that. I go there from start of Labor, Memorial Day to Labor Day.
That's it.
I'm there.
All right.
Times of summer.
All right, y'all. So
he comes for the crab cakes.
That's it. We're gonna end with all power to the people.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All right, straight ahead.